Hello everybody, welcome to our webinar for Attribution Solutions for Google Analytics. My name is Adrian Vender and I'm one of the Senior SEO and Analytics Consultants for Cardinal Path. Take care of a lot of other digital strategy things as well with the company. And today I wanted to teach a lot of things about attribution and source identification in Google Analytics and really try to identify how does Google Analytics do all these things, and what kind of insights can you gain from that proper identification? Brief little note about our company. We are just celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the merger of the 3 companies that you just saw right there. So it's been a pretty incredible year and really exciting times. We are a full-service internet marketing agency with a specialty for data and analytics services. And with that in mind, we're going to dive pretty deep into analytics right here. With today's presentation, I want to help answer some pretty important questions. One is I want to help all of us understand how does Google Analytics identify a traffic source. We just kind of put this tracking code on our web pages and magic data all of a sudden appears in the back end, which includes where people came from. And I want us to kind of understand, well, how technically does Google Analytics do that? Because when we understand how it's able to do that, we're also able to understand how it's not able to do that, and that's what it can lead to some missing data or incorrect data, and these are things that we want to clean up so that we have the right kind of data to work with as we do our analysis. The other thing I want to help understand is how Google Analytics handles attribution. Is it a last click, first click, something in between? We kind of have to understand how Google Analytics does it in order for us to kind of compare it to other possible models. And with that, I do want to explore briefly those other kind of models and really try to figure out how can you attribute a conversion to your particular sources that lead to traffic on your site. So we're going to go over these things, but before I go into the material, I did want to remind everybody that with this GoToWebinar, definitely encourage you to post some questions. After I go through the formal presentation, my colleague Kent, who is also on the call, will come back in and we'll do some Q&A with any of the questions that you post through. So feel free to leave questions during the course of the presentation, or you can wait till the very end to see if you'll have any questions by that point, and we'll go over them. Now, going into the material itself, when you go into your Google Analytics reports, and one of the standard reports that you might jump into is the All Traffic Sources report. And when you go there, you're going to see a list, just like you see on the left side right there, where you see a listing of source medium breakdown. And if we kind of break that apart a little bit, we see a list of sources, which essentially it means where exactly a visitor came from. Was it from a specific search engine or a specific website? It's kind of like a very specific source. Whereas the medium, it's kind of like saying how did they get there? Like, was it via search as a general method or through a general referral? That way we kind of have this roll-up effect where you may have a medium of search, but multiple specific sources that kind of roll up underneath that. So this report kind of gives us this listing of source medium, but obviously it does it automatically. This is kind of one of those things I mentioned that you don't really do anything else with the tracking code, and all of a sudden this data shows up. I want to again help you all understand how it's doing that and what are some different ways to help Google Analytics identify these traffic sources. And to kind of get a clue of that, we're gonna look at how the Google Analytics reports wants to put all these visits into different buckets, so we can kind of understand, okay, well, how does it differentiate from one bucket to the next? Of these buckets, one of them is direct traffic, which we commonly know as they directly type in the URL in the address bar, which it may include that, but you'll see later on that it doesn't always include that. Another type of traffic is referral traffic. They just clicked on a link and went to your website. We also have search traffic, which is kind of the same thing except they click through from a search result. I'll kind of go into what the differences are between that and a normal referral. And then we have this other bucket of campaigns. And these are kind of different in a way than all these other default ones that we had up above that, and I'll kind of go into how these campaigns are even identified and what you can do to kind of help populate the data in those reports. Now, to understand how some of these sources are identified, we have to understand these different methods that Google Analytics has to do some kind of identification. And one of the main methods that it does is it looks for the HTTP refer that's passed through when you load a page. And this refer, basically, when you click on a link on a web page that takes you to another web page, like in this case, since we're looking at your data, somebody clicked on a link from some other site and it loads your page on there. Well, this HTTP refer information is basically stored in the browser and passed through so that when your web page loads, the JavaScript can kind of look at the browser details and see that, oh, there was a referring URL, meaning somebody clicked on this link for this web page. That's the referring web page right there. And Google Analytics basically looks at that. It's one of the default methods to help identify the traffic sources. Now, there's a few different ways that it handles this. When we look back at that referral reports that we saw a little earlier, what this basically is it's nothing really fancy. It's basically when Google Analytics sees that refer, it'll just kind of take it and see, okay, this is a refer, so if it came from google.com, well, we've got that listed right there, and if you drill down into google.com, you can see the rest of the referral path that the page, that referred to you, where it came from. So this is all just kind of gathered from that refer. Nothing really special right there. Now the search reports, basically this is a special kind of refer, especially for the organic search items, because basically an organic search is identified by looking at the refer, but recognizing that refer as a search engine. So when you have something like Bing.com and little query parameter right there, what Google Analytics does is that it takes that and matches it with a default list of search engines that it keeps track of. So we can see right here that Bing.com is one of the recognized search engines with that proper query parameter of Q to tell us what the search term was. And so by looking at that refer information, the Google Analytics tracking code will say, yes, this is a refer, but this is a search refer. Therefore, we're going to kind of identify it as search inside the reports. So we have this default listing right here, and you can choose to even add additional search engines that aren't in that default list by using the add organic method. One example that might be actually helpful is Blekko, B-L-E-K-K-O. It's a search engine that's kind of been rising in popularity, and last time I checked, it's actually still not one of the default search engines in that Google Analytics listing. So if you want to treat Blekko referral traffic as search traffic and to actually get the search terms from that, you would actually use the add organic method to populate Blekko.com and put in the proper search query, so you can throw that information into your search reports and not just leave it as standard referral information. You can do a Google search for Google Analytics search engine configuration to kind of learn more about this default listing and how to add these other search engines. Now, paid search can also be thrown into these search reports as well. And this is basically done by some URL tagging. That's how Google Analytics will recognize it. And we'll touch that in a little bit about what this URL tagging really means. Now, going back to the direct traffic, what this basically means is that there's no refer. And there are many instances where somebody visits your website and there is no refer being passed through on the browser. One of those things is, yes, in fact, that they actually directly typed in the URL. Because there's no link involved, kind of this referring note here, I just type in a URL and I go there. So that kind of fits the mold of what we've traditionally thought direct traffic is. Another method is bookmarking. That's basically the same as directly typing it in, except saving you some keystrokes. So with these two things, yeah, this is direct traffic that we would come to know. But then things kind of get out of hand a little bit. If you click on a link from a desktop app like Outlook, you get your email and you click on a link from one of the emails you go through, and then it opens up a browser and you view the web page in there, because the link was inside some other program and it's just a mail program, it's not going to pass that refer. So for anybody that opens up an email that you sent to them and they go to your website, Google Analytics won't see a refer object, and it's basically going to recognize them as direct because it couldn't recognize anything at all. Another example is links from mobile apps. I use Twitter a lot, and I'll have a Twitter application. And if I'm looking through my feed and I see a tweet, there's a link there, and I kind of follow through and open that link inside my phone, if I'm using kind of a native app on my phone and I follow through in that link, again, it wasn't originally from a browser, so that link isn't going to pass any refer information. And when I visit that website, their analytics package will kind of label me as direct. Now, you and I know that that's not really the case, but Google Analytics doesn't have anything else to work off of. So there's many instances where, just the fact that a refer is gone because it's basically anything that when someone opens up a URL of your website without having clicked a link inside a web page of the browser, there will not be any refer. So that can cause a lot of problems, and we want to kind of identify, well, how can we get around this? How can we kind of make up for the fact that Google Analytics can't do the default way of recognizing things? Well, that's where we go into campaign tagging. This is where we basically say we want to define the source and medium and all the little source details about how somebody visits a web page. Now, to do that, we're going to have to use some query parameters. And for those that may not know, the query parameters are when you look at your URL and there's a question mark at some point, and you'll see a combination of some letters and numbers and an equal signs and things like that, and some ampersands to kind of separate things. Basically, you're seeing a list of query string parameters. So if we got something like site.com and we see a question mark, it's a start of the query parameter list, and we have ID equals 110. So we have this parameter of ID with a value of 110. And of course, you can add additional ones as well, delimiting them by the ampersand. So oftentimes, your site is configured in some respects to look at query string parameters to help process the content. As we can see with the Google store right here, we see a category equals fun. They've built their website to specifically find things like category and use that to affect the content processing of their site. But many times, if a website isn't built to kind of recognize a query string parameter, it's just going to ignore it. So if I just do something ridiculous like put a query string parameter of hi equals hello, that doesn't mean anything to the Google store's code, and it's just going to largely ignore it. So knowing that we kind of have that luxury of these extra query string parameters we can throw in the URL, and we're not going to crash anybody's website 99% of the time, I should say, Google Analytics has their own special query parameters that we can use to kind of further identify where people are coming from without really messing up anybody else's websites. So some of these query parameters are UTM_source, which basically translates into a source that we can define. We have UTM_medium, to act as a medium, and of course UTM_campaign to help label the campaign. Now, in a very general sense, I'm going to kind of go through how Google Analytics uses these query parameters and what that process looks like. What you can do is you add query parameters to a link. So if we go to site.com and you add a source of times and the medium of a banner, like a banner ad, and then a campaign for Winter Blitz, this is what the general marketing campaign I'm trying to promote here. If somebody visits my website via that link, for example, if I'm doing a banner advertising on some other site, they click on a link and they visit our website, Google Analytics will notice those query string parameters in the URL and take that information and add it to the reports. The thing I want to stress right here is that when they notice those special query string parameters, this is actually going to override whatever refer may exist. So I talked about the HTTP refer being one of the methods. It's kind of the default method to go to, but if those special Google Analytics query string parameters exist when somebody lands on your website, those are going to override the referrer. So very important detail to know. In terms of building out these query string parameters, some of us aren't, we're a little foreign to the idea of editing URL, putting in ampersands or question marks. Google, a long time ago, they built this URL builder tool where you just put in the URL that somebody, you're trying to direct somebody to, and then you have those different kind of query string options down below of source, medium, campaign name, and there's also term and content, which we'll review in a moment. So you can kind of easily build URLs right there, kind of one at a time. Or you can actually use a URL builder tool that we built. It's a Google Docs spreadsheet that one of my colleagues built, and there's the shortened Google URL right there. And the great thing about this is that it's a spreadsheet where you basically keep a log of the different URLs that you build. And the beauty of that is that, especially if you have multiple people that might be building links, having that running log of these definitions right here will help with kind of maintaining the integrity of, okay, when you name something as banner one time, you should use that same naming convention later on, because Google Analytics is case sensitive, character sensitive. If you have something like lowercase b for banner and then uppercase b for banner, those are two distinctly different values according to Google Analytics, and it's going to kind of separate them as two things. We don't want to have that happen, and the best way to kind of keep these things under control is by having this very visible public doc that you can kind of look at the history of previous tagged links. This also has a Google shortener, so definitely check it out. It's pretty nifty, and it's totally free. Just kind of follow the link and use that spreadsheet. Now, knowing that we can kind of build these links, we want to take a step back and kind of get a marketing organization mindset where we've already reviewed source and medium, where respectively it's who exactly brought them and what method did they kind of come through. But there's also the fact that we run these marketing campaigns, and we typically run these marketing campaigns and we advertise through different sources and mediums, whether it be offline and online. There's all sorts of different online stuff, and we can kind of roll these up under a general marketing campaign. So I think the point here is that we're not confined to a strict structure to how to use these source, medium, and campaign things. We have these flexibility of how they're associated with each other, and that's very important to kind of understand. Now, I mentioned earlier that we have these additional campaign options where we have campaign term and campaign content. These are optional, and you're going to use these if it kind of helps you segment your source data a little more. You can use campaign term to kind of identify a potential keyword that's coming through. For example, in your paid search links, you want to make sure that we identify the term, so that's populated in your paid search keyword reports. And then for campaign content, you can typically use that a lot for kind of identifying what piece of content that somebody clicked through on. I'll show an example later on with email where you might have two different links that go to the same page, but you kind of want to know, well, which link was it that sent the person over? We can do that with campaign tagging. Now, one example of how to do tagging, for example, like a paid Yahoo link, where you're doing the Yahoo paid search stuff, is you're running an ad and you have a display URL of cardinalpath.com/Google Seminars is one example. This happens to be maybe the actual destination URL that we're trying to bring people to. Now, the tagged URL that we're going to attempt here to say, okay, we want to label this as something very specific as paid search traffic that they wouldn't have otherwise recognized. We'll do a UTM campaign of seminars. We're doing this general promotion of our seminars. We have a source of Yahoo, because that is specifically who we're trying to run this ad through. We have a medium of CPC. That's our way of telling Google Analytics that the overall medium and method of how this traffic is coming through is paid search. And then the term, in this case, if somebody was clicking on an ad for analytics, they search for analytics, you want to include that term in there so we have some insight of what that search term was. So this right here is a fully tagged URL for a paid search ad. Now, another example is for email campaign tracking. I talked earlier about when a referrer is there, when a referrer is not there. I'll just say very simply right now, if you are running any email campaigns and you have not done any kind of URL tagging, you should probably start crying now, because I'll tell you that your data is bad. And I don't, I hope that doesn't sound harsh, but if you're not doing campaign tagging, meaning you're just relying on that default recognition of refer, two different things are going to be happening. Some of your traffic is people clicking on links from inside an Outlook or some other desktop-based mail program where there is no refer. So all that email traffic will actually be recognized as direct, which is not true. You and I both know that's not really the case, but that's how they're going to be labeled, and it's going to kind of confuse things for you. The other way they're going to be recognized, that if somebody is clicking on one of your email links from inside Gmail or Yahoo Mail, basically these web-based mail things, okay, it is a link from inside the browser that takes you to your website, so there is a referrer being passed, but it's the referrer of mail.com of some sort, like mail.yahoo.com or things like that. So you'll actually look at your referral reports and see all these mail things, and yeah, you can see that is mail traffic, but it's a very unintelligent way of kind of seeing your mail traffic identified, and plus you're knowing that direct traffic is also bringing in some of that, or it's really a result of some of that email traffic. So we want to really specifically identify your email traffic so that there's no question about whether they clicked on an email link or not. But you typically send out multiple emails over time, and we want to use campaign tagging to kind of segment this email campaign to the next one. Now in this example, let's say the destination URL is training, or one of our training pages for Google Seminars. The tagged URL, we do some similar things here, like a campaign of seminars, because again, we're going to promote our seminars via different means, but we kind of want to roll them up under this general campaign of seminars. So we're going to reuse that here like we did in the previous screen. We're going to do a source of newsletter-S4S. We have some different newsletters for kind of different email lists that we have, and this is just one of those sources that helps us identify things. We're going to use a medium of email. All of our email marketing kind of rolls up under that email value. And then for content, in this case, if we had two links kind of going to this page, and again I want to identify, well, is it the top link or the bottom link that they clicked, I can tag that link with the content. I apologize for the misspelling at the end of the URL. It should be UTM_content to help identify it as top link. Now it doesn't stop there. That's for all your online stuff, but you can potentially do offline tracking as well, because obviously when people see a billboard ad or some print ad and they go to your website, of course there's no refer object pass, so we can try to see if we can use this campaign tagging to kind of make up for that. So let's say we're going with this Google Store examples that we were using earlier. They're doing a promotion for selling their Frisbees, nice colorful Frisbees, and they want to do some billboard advertisement, but they want to track these things in Google Analytics. All they have to do is do a tagged URL, and it's as simple as that. Yeah, I'm not going to fool you with that at all. This is kind of going in the right direction, but totally failing on the execution right there. We can be a little clever about this, and what you can do is actually use a vanity URL, some kind of simpler URL that basically redirects to a campaign tagged link. Because the important thing is that when the person arrives in the web page and the page loads, it's what does the URL show on that page. So you can actually do something like site.com/promo. When people kind of type that into the URL, there's actually a redirect that your server will do that then takes them to this tagged page where we have these recognized source, medium, and campaign. So the important thing there is to make sure you use a 301 redirect to kind of take people to that tagged version of the URL. You can have all sorts of different ways of using campaign tagging. I think the bottom line is that you're going to have different opportunities where the default HTTP refer method is either unreliable or just simply not available, and we can use these campaign tagging at any moment where we realize, okay, we need to specifically label things. And the important reason for that is because you have to get your data right. If you don't have your data correct inside your analytics accounts, you're not going to be able to do proper analysis. It's just misguided, and you won't be able to do anything intelligent. And especially something with email, like I alluded to earlier. We don't want to just kind of guess what direct traffic and mail.refers are, a result of our email campaigns. No, we want to label something as email, and even more so, like we want to be very specific about our different emails that we send out so we can do some comparisons of whether this email campaign is better than the other one. For example, let's say you're doing kind of an A/B test of sending one version of email out to half of your audience and sending the other version out to a different audience to see, well, how do they respond to it. We're using something like add content as an example to help label the two different audiences. So, okay, we got them in their two different buckets. We've taken care of that data problem right there. And when you do that and then traffic starts rolling in, that's when the information starts to get a little interesting. A very small example, let's say, okay, we've got these two different numbers for visits that the two email campaigns resulted in, and then according to each one, we have these per visit goal value where some people did convert, and based on some of the revenue numbers that you set for your goals, we can see that, okay, average it out over all the visits, and we can see that there's a per visit value of 12 cents for email version 2 and then 15 cents for email version 1. Why is this interesting? It may not seem interesting with such a small amount of traffic of 170 to on top of 116, but what we also try to instill is the fact that you have to look for opportunities for conversion optimization. There's a 3-cent difference here, and if you were running some very large email campaigns, for example, let's say each version got 20,000 visits, and we kept that same value per visit kind of metric that we had right there, there's going to be a huge difference in how much money, how much revenue is actually generated for a day, and if you kind of keep that trend over a period of a month, you can see that there's actually an $18,000 difference between these two email versions. So it's obviously you want to know that if you do some A/B testing on your emails, you want to know with some good data and some good evidence of which one is the better one. None of this is possible if you don't label your sources correctly. So that is the main takeaway of making sure, how does Google Analytics identify sources, and really why is it important? It's a kind of lead to these insights that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Now that we have kind of an understanding of how sources are identified in Google Analytics, we kind of want to jump into a little bit about attribution, where Google Analytics does a good job via cookies to kind of say, okay, here's a source, we're going to kind of store that information inside a cookie, and that's very important because when people do execute page views and different things like that, or more important performance metrics like conversions or transactions, things like that, we need to have a good understanding of, well, how does Google Analytics give credit to a particular source? Is it the very first source that sent this person to my website? Is it the very last one? Is it some kind of mixture of it? That's understanding those models is very important for you to understand how to evaluate the different marketing efforts you have for your website. Now, there's some different attribution models that we're going to review, but I'm going to review a couple of them. And basically, the attribution model is a way to kind of assign credit for any conversions that occur and give that credit back to a particular source of traffic. Some of the most long-known attribution models, there's first-click attribution, where the visitor's original source that took them to your website, even if they convert 5 visits down the road via different channels, the attribution is kind of given credit to the original source. And then conversely, we have last-click attribution, where it's the most recent. All those previous visits, that's nice that they came to our website, but they didn't close the deal. This last visit that the conversion actually happened in is the one that closed the deal. So maybe that's the way to really look at your traffic. I'm not here to say which method is right or wrong. It all depends on really your business model and various other things. So I definitely can't speak to that, but we want to understand these models so that you can take a step back and realize, well, which one is the best model for you to use. Now, Google Analytics uses the last-click attribution model, where Let's say somebody goes to your website via a Google search, then later on, maybe the next day, they go do a Yahoo search and go to your website, and then maybe the next day, they're just kind of making their rounds through all the different search engines, they go to Bing. They've done a lot of research about whatever product they're trying to buy, and they go do a search on Bing, click on a search result that takes them to your web page, and now they decide, yeah, I'm ready to buy this, or I'm ready to kind of fill out that form to get that white paper. Because it happens on that most recent source, Bing is going to be credited for that conversion. The attribution is kind of weighted to them for that, and that's, if you have any kind of revenue tracking information going on your analytics, that's going to get the credit for generating that revenue. Now things change a little bit with multi-channel funnels, because traditionally in Google Analytics, all your standard reports, like I said, it's last-click attribution, but many people were like, well, we want to break away from that. We kind of want that freedom to determine, what if we want to look at something earlier in the path, and we don't kind of want to ignore those things outright. Multi-channel funnels kind of solves that problem quite a bit, where we can look at these different sources over a period of a conversion path and kind of find insights about, well, how valuable were these things in their earlier visits. Now, the multi-channel funnel overview, one of the simplest ways that we can kind of look at this kind of data and see, well, how do they overlap, is these nice Venn diagrams that if you go in there, you got these checkboxes to determine which ones do we overlay right there. We can see that we've got organic, direct, and paid advertising. We can see visually where the conversions that are solely originating from just organic traffic, or each one respectively, we can kind of see where they're just standing alone, but we can also see the overlap of the Venn diagrams to see, all right, when people went down a conversion path, they actually crossed all three, an organic, direct, and paid, in some order to eventually convert. So, those three channels were very important as a whole to kind of deliver these conversions. You can also kind of choose different combinations. We can deselect direct and say, well, let's look at refer and see how those overlaps go. Where was it that all three contributed to a conversion, or what about just two of them? Organic plus direct only, or paid plus refer. We have these options in this little visualization right here. Now, assisted conversions is something that we never really saw before inside Google Analytics, and because we recognize that Google Analytics was a last-click attribution model, these assisted conversions are basically ways that recognize that a source was a part of the conversion path. Maybe it wasn't the last click, but it was a click earlier in the process, and basically we can kind of look at these as assists, like Steve Nash of my Phoenix Suns here in Arizona. Just kind of clarify things right there where my rooting interests are. So we've got these assists where Google, let's say some organic searches that people did and went to your website, they didn't convert right then, but at least it was Google that brought these people to your website, so it's got to count for something, and Google Analytics multi-channel funnels will kind of keep track of those kind of activities. So if we go into the assisted conversions report, there's actually quite a bit of little details here that I want to break down for you. One is that we can see the last click, last interaction conversions, and if you have some revenue data, the kind of dollar amounts that this kind of ended up to. This is very similar to what we've seen inside the standard reports. This is because of some different ways that direct traffic is handled between standard and multi-channel funnels. These numbers may not be 100% the same as what you'll see as the last click stuff in the standard reports, but it's close to there, minus a few caveats. The great thing about this report is that we have these assisted conversions. This is what we've never seen before at all. And this is wonderful because just to know that a source was a touch point prior to a conversion is going to say a lot about, really the value of these different sources as you're doing your marketing campaigns. We can see that there's so much money that's actually somewhat contributed from these sources, and so we definitely don't want to ignore these things at all. Now we've also got these things right here where we've got last interaction and assisted interactions, And there's a nice little column in there that basically gives us a ratio of assisted over last interaction conversions. So as an example, we can see that direct had a ratio, resulting in 0.66, under 1, and then we have something like social network where it actually went above 1 to 1.45. And this ratio is basically your exposure to closer ratio. Was something simply an exposure that, okay, it got people to your site, but they didn't convert yet, or is it a source that closed the deal? Yeah, it got people to your website, and it actually got them to convert as well. So if we look at those two examples of direct and social network, we can see that direct traffic is definitely a closer, while the social media traffic is more as an exposer. In this example, that's not too shocking. If somebody's kind of directly going to your website, assuming we've done everything else to say they're not these fake directs, we want to do campaign tagging to kind of clean that data up. If these are true direct traffic folks, yeah, they already know about your business. They've already visited you before, so there's a little bit of loyalty already being built. So it's not surprising that they might be more eager to buy something if they go back to your site via direct method. Whereas social network, that's where people will a lot of times first discover you. They're learning about you. They might convert, but they oftentimes may not convert. So you can actually see this in that ratio column. And although direct and social network, they might be obvious in terms of whether they would be exposers or closers, but if you do a lot of different marketing campaigns, you won't inherently know without this data to know whether it is a exposer or closer. So it's great to have this kind of data. Now, another great thing that we get from multi-channel funnels are these conversion paths, where you basically have these listings of these conversion paths that resulted in a conversion. One thing to note here is that for multi-channel funnels, when a conversion happens, it's going to analyze the different channels that eventually brought the person to the site, but it's going to do that via a 30-day look-back period. So it's a maximum of 30 days. If somebody kind of goes to your website right now and converts, Google Analytics will look back at the previous 30 days to see what are the different channels or sources that they came through. Anything that, if they visited your site via Google search 45 days ago and converted the day, that Google search 45 days ago will not be factored into these conversion paths. So it's very important to kind of understand that 30-day look-back period. Most of the time, if it's kind of your normal transactional site, you don't have that long of a sales cycle. But if you do things like, I think one of my favorite examples is if you do software as a service and you bring people to your site, they don't have to buy anything right away. It's like a 30-day free trial, and then 30 days comes up, and maybe a few more, like they're busy, they couldn't quite sign up for a full account, but they intend to, and they do, maybe at the 35th day after their original visit. The thing there is, yeah, you'll get that conversion, but when it does that 30-day look back, it won't factor in that original Google search from 35 days prior to that. So it's kind of important to understand that. Now, if we look at these different conversion paths, we can kind of see how people hopped from one channel to another that eventually led to these conversions. So we can see things like organic search versus direct. What this is basically saying is that people discovered you via organic, didn't convert via that search, but then when they came back a second time directly, they bought something there. So very classic example of exposing, being discovered via search. They liked you, they remembered your website, they went back directly, and they bought something. You can also see that with like referrals. It's the same kind of idea right there. Even that interesting question of organic search and paid search. We always wonder, should I invest in organic search only or do paid, or what about the combination of both? What value is it when these two channels are integrated? That's hard for me to assume how well it's going to perform for you. So use these reports, use this actual data that you'll get from your website to help answer that question. Do you see some conversion opportunities that happen when these two channels are mixed in for those group of visitors? You're going to get that insight with this. Now, the time lag report, it's simply telling you how many days did it take from somebody to kind of, when they first visit your website to convert. A lot of times in this example, of course, there'll be kind of a 0 time lag where people that visited the website, they kind of converted right then. But that's not always the case. We can kind of see that yeah, oftentimes it took them a day or two. We can even see that when we get down to the 12 plus, obviously a larger bucket of time right there, we can see that there's a good amount of people that did take a pretty long time from their first visit to their last one that they ended up converting on. So we can see that visualized right there. We see that kind of tail that goes through until we get to that bigger bucket. Now the path length, the great thing about this report is basically, the path length is basically how many channels, that we kind of saw a few screens ago, did it take to eventually convert. And this screen tells you whether or not you have some kind of attribution dilemma, multi-attribution dilemma. And if you see right here that, okay, one path, was responsible for almost 70% of the conversions, that's great, but you can also see that, well, that means 30% took more than one visit. So you can't just rely on last click interaction because it's, well, you've got all these multi-source kind of things happening. So this tells you that you have some kind of attribution dilemma. Sometimes it takes people 2 visits or 3 visits or 4 channels and things like that. So this report gives you that insight of whether that you have that dilemma or not. Now, overall, I mean, there's so many details about multi-channel funnels. I think some things to kind of tell you are that even though there's some very new features and that are very different from our Google Analytics that we knew in the past, there actually is a lot of things that are carried over from how we've used the normal Google Analytics reports so that it makes things comfortable. We've got conversion segments, which, basically the mindset you can take there is using advanced segments. You kind of want to look at these particular conversion paths and kind of say, well, let's segment it down to do some deeper analysis. You can do that. It's really simple to kind of do that in multi-channel funnels. You can also either look at all conversions or basically look at the lens of very specific conversions to see, well, what are the conversion paths for just my transactions, or what about these white paper downloads that I have to just at one goal. You can do that. You can also do and easily focus on AdWords. For the previous screens I showed you, we're kind of looking at all of your traffic, but the great thing about Google Analytics, especially in light of there's Google Analytics and there's Google Analytics Premium and this whole paid thing, and people wonder, well, what does that mean for Google Analytics? I'll tell you right now that because we all know Google makes their money from AdWords, that's the thing that keeps them alive and makes them the powerful beast that they are. They will do anything for the Google Analytics standard, the free version that you and I use, that if it's going to help AdWords advertisers, they'll make sure that these reports are available inside for all analytics users. So using these multi-channel funnel views and having a very specific AdWords button right there shows their commitment of, yeah, we want to help the AdWords advertisers. We see the agenda, but we get these great reports as a result of it. So you can look at AdWords specifically through that lens to kind of look at your multiple channels. You can also do some channel groupings, and you can drill down very easily from either these general groupings like search and direct like we just saw, or you can look at source medium paths or just source or medium or other things, perhaps keyword as an example. We have that same versatility of, look, whatever dimension you want to look through, just choose it, and we'll kind of populate the data on the fly, and you can go from there. It's very easy. You can also use secondary dimensions to kind of use that kind of insightful analysis, and then you can also use regex in the advanced kind of filter field right there. If you click that, you can use regex to kind of filter your data through very specific patterns if you're a regex wizard. I recommend you be a regex wizard because you just do a lot more awesome analytics with that. Now, because we have learned, okay, we can see these conversion paths, we have this insight about how people will take multiple visits through multiple channels to kind of eventually convert. And we still go back to that question of, how do you credit these different channels that may have occurred? Because as we've seen, it's not just one visit and one channel that people convert on. It's going to be across multiple ones. And in the standard Google Analytics reports, it being a last-click attribution system, this is the way that the credit is given. if people go to your site via some organic search as channel 1, and they go back via social network link channel 2, and then at the very end they just kind of directly go back to your site via just a direct visit, and when they convert, that last direct visit gets 100% of the credit. Well, that doesn't really seem so right. We have all these other channels that were responsible in some way, but the standard attribution model of analytics doesn't give us anything like that. Maybe we want to do a first-click attribution where, hey, these future channels wouldn't have had a chance unless that very first one brought people to the site. So that's very important. You can make a case for that, but they didn't close a deal. It did take some other channels later on to kind of bring people to the site and eventually convert. This may or may not be the right model for you. Maybe you want to be kind of very democratic, and let's give everybody some kind of share where you do this equal or a linear distribution, where if they took 5 different channels to go to your website, each one of them gets a very equal amount of that credit. Seems fair, but to play devil's advocate, the fact that they give channel 2 the same weight as channel 5, the actual closer of the deal, that doesn't seem very fair to me, at least for some of the different models that I'm thinking of for some of my client websites. You have a U-curve where maybe you say, well, they couldn't do anything on our website unless they discovered it in the first place, but at the same time, we want to acknowledge that last touch because that's the one that closed the deal, and all those middle ones are important, but just not as important. So maybe we do this U-curve thing where we place a little more emphasis on that first and last click and kind of divvy up the the remainder inside. Sounds reasonable. That might be valid for some of your different models out there. There's also the decay where maybe you have a reason to not put so much emphasis on that first channel, especially if it didn't convert. If it takes somebody a course of 5 visits and 5 different channels to convert, how much credit can we really give that first one? And maybe we want to do a decaying model where the farther back a channel was, the less credit it does, and obviously the bulk of it comes to the most immediate channel. This might be the right thing too. The unfortunate thing I have to tell you is that I can't give you the answer of which attribution model is most appropriate. In order to kind of figure out, help you answer which one's the most important, I think the first thing to kind of acknowledge is, well, how do you even, how could you even establish an attribution model? Because again, standard reports, last click interaction, that's the way it is. Multi-channel funnels, it doesn't really follow an attribution model. It's basically giving you the conversion path data to do as you wish. So we don't inherently have that way of doing attribution modeling. If you have Google Analytics Premium, there's some features that do attribution modeling. Maybe great for some of us, but not for the rest of us. If you're a true Excel ninja, what I actually recommend is getting that conversion path data from multi-channel funnels and exporting that. Basically, most of this data in analytics can be exported via CSV, and most things are kind of coming through the API. For the multi-channel stuff, you can at least do the CSV, and you get that data in a spreadsheet. And if you're an Excel wizard, all things are possible for you inside Excel, and you can actually develop an attribution modeling system in Excel. Try out those different modeling systems and see, well, which one is the best one. And to kind of help finally answer that question of which attribution model should you use, very simply, use the attribution model that makes you or your boss look awesome. Not up for me to say what you should do. I think, in this business world that we have right there, we want to make sure that we have winners in this, and not just you selfishly. I know that last statement right there is like, look out for yourself. You can do that, but let's, you can never go wrong with win-win-win situations where you look great, your boss looks great. If you're doing marketing on behalf of a client or just the company you work for, they need to make money too, and whatever one adds the greatest clarity to how you're doing your marketing and really what you all feel is the most important way to identify how to do that attribution, that's the model you have to go off of. So it's a question you have to ask yourself once you figure out how to get this data and do some kind of attribution modeling. But at the end of the day, none of this matters if your data is wrong. And it goes all the way back to identifying how Google Analytics identifies sources and what you can do to help make sure that data is clean. So that's my formal presentation today. I have my contact information right there in case you want to reach out to me on Twitter or Google+, and I'm on all the other social networks as well. I just didn't list them on here. You can also connect with Cardinal Path via the different methods right there as well. What I would like to do is actually bring Kent back up. Again, he's my colleague here that's helping me host this webinar, because we're actually going to go into a little Q&A time.
Hey there, Adrian. Hi, everyone. So we have a couple questions here, and I encourage any of you who have questions still to ask them in the questions pane. First off, what other sensitive uses for the term parameter can you imagine besides SEM?
So for the term parameter, one possible example is, let's say you're doing some, I'm trying to think of something like banner ads, or in terms of the email tagging right there. Oh, I guess one term actually I like to do for social media stuff, like when we promote these webinars or some of the seminars that we do, this is very specific to us, but you might actually have some similarities right here. If we're trying to promote a seminar, we may use a campaign of seminar. If it's through some Twitter advertising, okay, we'll do a source of Twitter and a medium of social, as we might define it here. But there's a lot of us that are kind of doing some promotions right there, and we'll reserve content for something, very specific, like, okay, what's the, we had two different versions of this tweets that we're sending out, so we'll use content to identify which version. But let's say we also want to give credit to the people. If I promote something and Kent here promotes these tweets, and then we've got some of our other colleagues doing it, and if we want to kind of identify, well, which people, we have all these tweets coming out from different folks, how can we kind of identify those different things? I've oftentimes used that term tag to kind of say, well, me, a vendor, as one thing, so that when we go inside the analytics reports, we drill down into this Twitter campaign that we were doing for a seminar, we can look at something like term and see, all right, well, there's the ones that were labeled from Kent and Adrian and Dave Booth and some of the other folks in our company, and we can see that, well, Adrian's tweets help generate X amount of traffic, and Kent's as well, just to kind of see things right there. So that's one example. I mean, it sounds like a stretch, but really, these are purely optional. I wouldn't be bogged down to think that it has to be a term and a content. I would say whatever, when you're doing these campaigns and you have these different ways that your campaigns are going out, just try to identify, well, what are those different things, so we can see that, all right, how can we label all those different things? A term, a UTM term might use a term, but it can be something else as well. There's going to be many examples, but that's kind of one of them right there.
All right, moving on. Regarding multi-channel funnels, in most cases I saw mostly visit chains consisting of the same source medium combination. Example, Google CPC for 1, 2, 3 times. I heard a lot of other voices saying the same. Given you experienced the same, what would you learn, example, from a chain of Google CPC? Pushing the users for bookmarks?
Yeah, because, if I saw, if I can think of some client examples off my head, if I saw a string of, CPC and then CPC and CPC, that kind of concerns me a little bit, because if they are essentially clicking on a new ad, these 3 different times, and it's going to cost me, 3 times as much money as I would like it to in an ideal world, I'm definitely concerned. That would be a concerning insight for me, and I would definitely kind of have the question of, well, why didn't they convert the first time around? And that's a question you're going to ask for any traffic. I mean, we would love people to convert the first time around, but it is a little concerning for me when it is the exact same channel that results in that, because each channel or method that brings people to your website, they're going to speak to a different kind of intent that you try to capture people for, and just the different way you caught them. And when the exact same medium just doesn't close right off the bat, I definitely want to analyze, okay, let's put ourselves in their shoes. Let's look at, if I clicked on this ad and went to the site, why aren't I converting? Maybe if you took yourself through the process and you find out that maybe you have the wrong landing page. They clicked on one ad and you find that, well, a particular campaign, it's always this campaign that never converts right away, and if you went to that destination page, yes, it's kind of helpful, but it didn't really bring people to the call to action or the information they were looking for, where maybe that third, or that final channel of the CPC stuff, they had clicked on a different ad, for a different campaign that the landing page actually really helped them to find the information they were looking for. So you might have some landing page analysis to do to see, did you take people to the right place? So that's one potential way that I would look at that.
Next up. Formerly, example, direct didn't override search. Since sometimes for multi-channel funnels, this is different, what makes a CPC search direct chain possible? Or sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great question, because that kind of alludes to that small statement I made earlier about how direct traffic between your standard reports and multi-channel reports are treated a little differently. So here's how it works out. In your standard reports, and really in the cookies that Google Analytics uses, when I say Google Analytics is a last click attribution, I should actually say, in terms of how the cookies go, it's a last recognized click. Meaning, if refer and campaign tag links, like these are ways for Google Analytics to recognize things, and obviously the lack of those things is it's unrecognized. So if somebody goes to your website via a organic Google search, what will actually happen in the cookies, as JavaScript determines, oh, this person came from, here's a refer, and they came from a Google organic search based on our special organic list. So we'll write the cookies accordingly to say they came from Google Organic, and that information will be used to kind of populate the data inside the standard reports. Now, if I come back a second time, and I come back direct, this is where things diverge, and then let me explain those two things. For your cookies and for your standard analytics reports, when I come back direct that second time, there is no new recognized system, whether it be by refer or anything like that. So the cookies will stay the same. It'll basically carry through the most, the last recognized source of organic from Google, and leave those cookies intact, which then when all that activity for that visit, when it goes into analytics, it's going to still be recognized as giving credit to Google Organic. So in all those standard reports and in your cookies, new direct visits will not override the previously recognized stuff. Now, multi-channel funnels, thankfully, Google Analytics realized, well, let's not just rely on cookies. If we're able to see that somebody, at one point visited via Google Organic search, and their second visit, there was no cookie change or anything like that, like it was basically a carry through, we're going to be intelligent enough and say, well, that's really a direct visit, and we'll label that as such inside multi-channel funnels. And that is the way that you'll see a Google, or in this case I use organic for the first channel, and then a direct as a second channel inside multi-channel funnels. The multi-channel funnels did that intelligent way of determining that second visit was direct, whereas that standard reporting is kind of using that unfortunately limited way of saying, well, the cookies didn't change, therefore we won't update it and we'll keep it as Google Organic. So that is, again, the reason why last click attribution data inside multi-channel funnels may not be the same as, for the same thing in the standard reports, because of how direct traffic is treated slightly differently.
Next up, is there a way to apply custom channel groupings across profiles or accounts?
No. Yeah, and I'm racking my brain, because across profiles and accounts, I would say not yet, unless I'm surprised. Now, because the coder in me is thinking, there are many extensions and plugins that people have used to basically, on a given screen, on a given profile where you have information, let's use some JavaScript magic and look at the magic behind the scenes and pull out some of these channel groupings, save them inside your browser so that when you go to a different profile or account, you can basically kind of say, okay, now let's dump this saved information from my browser and put it into this account. This already exists for like goals and filters when you're in a profile setting screen, and the same thing can possibly happen for the channel groupings. Not sure if anybody's developed that extension, and I'm pretty sure it's not a native feature yet for Google Analytics to kind of transfer these things from within the proper interface to different profiles and accounts.
All right, that's all.
Which is frustrating, but
that's all of our questions. I'll give a couple seconds here in case there's any last ones. Oh, there we go. Home to dashboard can do this. Oh, apparently someone says home to dashboard can do this with share dashboard.
Oh, the dashboarding stuff kind of takes us down a different path. I mean, basically, there's different things that can be shared very easily from the interface, and there's other things that haven't been built in very well. If I'm understanding that question correctly or that statement correctly, it more pertains to the dashboard screens, at least the way I'm hearing that, which is different than the MCF reports and some other things right there. I apologize if I'm misunderstanding that.
All right, well, we're 2 minutes after 11, so I think this is a good time to wrap up.